7 seconds, the spotter screamed. The bullet's still in the air. She missed, sir. She missed. Then the man 3,820 meters away folded to the ground, and the radio went dead silent. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Because the woman lying behind that rifle had never fired a shot in combat in her life. She fixed rifles. She cleaned them. She logged serial numbers while real soldiers walked past her like furniture. Staff Sergeant Lena Carter pulled off the scope and said one sentence into the quiet, "Now check the compound. Someone was waiting for us." If you've ever been underestimated by people who never bothered to look, stay with me to the end. Subscribe and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. The armory at Forward Operating Base Meridian smelled like gun oil, cold metal, and 7 years of silence. Staff Sergeant Lena Carter had learned to love that smell. She loved it the way some people love the smell of old books, not because it was glamorous, but because it meant something. It meant order. It meant control. It meant a world she understood completely, a world that made sense in ways the rest of her life never had. She was 34 years old. Medium height, lean through the shoulders, hands that moved with quiet, deliberate certainty, whether she was field stripping an M4 or threading a suppressor onto a barrel she'd refinished herself. Her hair was pulled back the same way every single morning, tight, practical, no argument. She wore her rank like most soldiers wore their boots. Because it was required, not because she needed anyone to see it. The armory was her domain. 42 meters long, climate-controlled, 1,200 weapons on catalog. She knew every single one of them, not just the make and model and serial number. She knew their histories. Which rifles had jammed in Kandahar and why? Which optics had drifted after a hard vehicle rollover outside Bagram? Which suppressors had been signed out 3 times in a week by a particular special operations team that never logged their actual usage? She noticed everything. That was her gift. And her curse. Because noticing everything in a place like FOB Meridian meant noticing the things you were never supposed to see. Chant. It was a Tuesday morning, 0510 hours, when Sergeant First Class Dominic Reyes first said the words that would define the next year of her life. Reyes was a team leader, 12 years in the Rangers, built like a refrigerator that had once played college football. He walked into her armory like he owned it. They all did. Slapped both palms on her counter and leaned forward with the particular kind of casual aggression men use when they want to make clear they're not actually asking for something. "Carter, I need the MRAD pulled, cleaned, and ready for checkout by 06. Lena looked up from the inventory sheet she was annotating. "Reyes, I need a checkout form and authorized mission number and the unit commander's signature by 06. He stared at her. "You're kidding." "Try me." He dropped his chin and did the slow exhale thing. The thing men do when they've decided the problem isn't the rules, it's the woman enforcing them. "Carter, I don't have time for your paperwork games. This is a Tier 1 operation. The rifle needs to go. Then get me a Tier 1 signature and it goes in under 5 minutes. She picked up her pen again. "I'm not making rules, Reyes. I'm following them. Big difference." He stared at her for a long moment. The kind of stare designed to make someone feel small. Lena had been receiving that stare from men for 7 years. She had developed an immunity to it somewhere around year 2. "You know what your problem is," he finally said. "I'm sure you're about to tell me. You've been in this armory so long you forgot you're supposed to be a soldier." She set down her pen, looked at him directly, kept her voice completely flat. "Sergeant Reyes, the MRAD is a CHATAC M200 variant, chambered in .408 CHATAC, with a custom cold hammer forged barrel and a Nightforce AT ACR 7 to 35 x 56 f1 scope zeroed at 1,000 meters. The last time your team signed it out, Specialist Dunbar returned it with a cracked firing pin retaining plate because someone, and I'm not naming names, dropped it off the back of a MRAP and didn't report it. I repaired that myself on my own time, because if your team had taken that rifle into the field with that damage, someone might have died. So before you tell me what a soldier is supposed to be, get me the form." The armory went very quiet. Reyes's jaw tightened. Then he straightened up, turned around, and walked out without another word. Private First Class. Alicia Torres, 22 years old, and 2 months into her first deployment, had been watching from the cleaning station in the back corner. She waited until the door closed, then looked at Lena. "Does that happen a lot, Sergeant?" "Every other Tuesday," Lena said, and went back to her inventory sheet. What Torres didn't know, what almost nobody on that base knew, was that before Lena Carter joined the United States Army, she had been something else entirely. She had been a shooter, not a soldier shooter, not range qualified, not basic marksmanship, a competitor, a technician, a person who understood the relationship between a bullet a barrel and 500 meters of variable wind the way some people understand music intuitively deeply, in a language that existed somewhere below thought. She'd started when she was 16. Her grandfather had a ranch in West Texas, 1,200 acres of scrubland and mesquite, and he believed that a young woman should know 2 things: how to cook and how to defend herself. He'd taught her to cook first, which she was average at. Then he'd taken her out to a rock outcropping at the far edge of the property with an old .308 Remington 700 and set up a steel plate at 400 meters. She'd hit it on her 3rd shot. Her grandfather, a man who had served in Vietnam and did not give compliments easily, had looked at her for a long moment and said, "Do it again." She did. Again. She did. He didn't say anything for a while, just stood there looking at the steel plate in the distance, then back at her, then at the way she was naturally compensating for the crosswind without being told to. "Lena," he said finally, "your grandmother was the best shot I ever knew. I thought I'd never see anything like her." He looked at her one more time. "I was wrong." By 19, she was competing regionally. By 21, she had qualified for the National Precision Rifle Series. By 23, she had broken 3 national records in long-range precision shooting and had been shortlisted for a program that was quietly, unofficially designed to identify civilian shooters with potential military application. The attention was extraordinary, and it broke her. Not the shooting. She loved the shooting. She loved the math of it, the physics, the way a problem that could kill you at distance became solvable if you were patient and precise and honest about what you didn't know. She loved that honesty. The bullet didn't care about your feelings. The wind didn't care about your reputation. You were either correct or you weren't. But the attention, the coaches, the sponsors, the military talent scouts, the reporters who wanted to write the story about the girl from West Texas, the men who couldn't decide whether to take her seriously or dismiss her, and usually chose whichever option was more convenient for them in that moment, that had slowly, quietly hollowed her out. One morning in late October, 3 weeks before what would have been her most important competition, she had driven to the range at 0500 and sat in her truck for 2 hours without getting out. She didn't know why. She just sat there. And somewhere in those 2 hours, she made a decision she couldn't fully explain, even to herself. She enlisted. She requested the most invisible technical role she could find. She chose to disappear. "You understand what you're giving up," her mother had said. "Yes. You had a future." "I have a future. It's just different." "Lena." "Mom, I need quiet. I need structure. I need to do something that matters without everyone watching while I do it. The Army has that. This has that." Her mother had looked at her for a long time with the particular expression mothers have when they know they can't win an argument and also know they might be right anyway. "You're going to be invisible," her mother finally said. Lena had nodded. "That's the idea." For 7 years it had worked. She was good at her job. Extraordinary at it, actually, though. She would never have described it that way herself. She could diagnose a weapon system's failure faster than any armorer on base. She could rebuild a bolt carrier group blindfolded. She understood ammunition science, ballistics, physics, optics, calibration, and environmental compensation at a level that most active-duty snipers never achieved, because most active-duty snipers had been trained to shoot at distances up to 1,500 meters. and had been told explicitly and repeatedly that anything beyond that was a matter of luck. Lena Carter had never believed in luck. She believed in variables and the management of variables. But she kept that to herself. She filed her maintenance logs. She ran her inventory inspections. She answered questions from young specialists who needed help and stonewalled senior NCOs who tried to bypass her paperwork requirements. She ate alone most days. She ran 5 miles every morning before the base fully woke up. She slept 6 hours, always no exceptions, because her grandfather had told her that fatigue was the enemy of precision, and she had never found a reason to disagree. She was by every visible measure exactly what the base believed her to be. A weapons technician, the woman in the armory, Lena from the armory, and she was fine with that. Until the night Colonel Warren Hayes walked through her door, carrying a case, she immediately recognized, not because she'd ever seen that exact case, but because she knew the dimensions, the weight, the specific combination of impact-resistant polymer and foam cutouts that could only mean one thing. She set down her cleaning kit. She looked at the case. Then she looked at Hayes. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, and had the kind of face that had stopped performing confidence for other people about 20 years ago. He wasn't trying to look authoritative. He just was. "Sergeant Carter," he said. "Colonel? You know what's in this case." It wasn't a question. She looked at the dimensions again. The handle placement. The specific depth. "That's a Accuracy International AX50, she said. 50 caliber. But that's not standard configuration. That case is 6 centimeters too deep for standard configuration, which means it's got an extended barrel. Custom chambering. Probably .50 BMG with a match-grade variant." She paused. "Maybe something newer." Hayes set the case on her counter and opened it. The rifle was unlike anything she'd seen issued. It was a development platform. She could see that immediately a weapon that had been constructed to an engineering standard several generations beyond current field issue. The barrel was longer than any standard .50 caliber she'd handled. The stock system was adjustable in 6 axes. The bipod was a custom fabrication. The scope was a unit she'd never seen before military specification. No civilian equivalent, with a reticle system that looked like it had been designed for a very specific purpose at a very specific distance. She pulled her eyes away from the rifle and looked at Hayes. "Where did this come from?" "An advanced weapons development program that doesn't officially exist," he said. "This rifle was built to confirm a hypothesis, which is that a target at 3,820 meters can be reliably neutralized by a competent shooter in controlled conditions." Lena was quiet for a moment. 3,820 meters. Yes. The current world record for a confirmed kill is around 3,540 meters. Canadian Army, 2017. Yes. You want to break that record? "I want to complete a mission," Hayes said. "The record is incidental." She looked at the rifle again. Her hands, completely without her permission, moved forward and rested on the edge of the case. Not touching, just close. "Who's the shooter?" Hayes looked at her steadily. "That's why I'm here." The silence in the armory was very complete. Lena took a step back from the case, crossed her arms. Her voice came out flatter than she intended. "No. Hear me out. Colonel, with respect, no. I'm a weapons technician. I'm an armorer. I keep this base's weapons functional. I am not a sniper. I am not a special operations asset, and whatever program built this rifle, I'm not the person you're looking for. You hold 3 national records in long-range precision shooting." The words landed in the room like a dropped weapon. Lena went very still. She had not told anyone that. Not when she enlisted. Not during her service. The records were registered under her maiden name before she'd legally changed it at 25. She had been careful. Deliberately, methodically careful. She kept her voice even. "I don't know what you think you know, Colonel. I know exactly what I know," Hayes said quietly. "And I've known it for 2 years. I didn't come to you before because you didn't want to be found, and I respect that. But I need you now, and I need you to understand what's actually at stake before you say no again." She waited. Hayes reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded satellite image. He placed it on her counter. "His name is Commander Javad Malik. He operates out of a compound in a river valley at a specific coordinate that I'll give you under classification. He controls weapons supply routes that have killed 14 American soldiers in the last 8 months. We've tried to eliminate him 4 times. He moves unpredictably. He keeps distance between himself and any position we can surveil. Our best intelligence window puts him at this location for a maximum of 72 hours, during which he will be exposed once at a moment and position we've calculated. At 3,820 meters. At 3,820 meters. She looked at the satellite image, the valley, the compound, the distance markers hand annotated in red. "What do your snipers say? Every qualified sniper team I have has refused the mission." She looked up. They refused. They assessed the shot as beyond achievable parameters. Wind layering in that valley creates unpredictable shear at 3 different altitude bands. Temperature differential between the ridge and the valley floor is significant. The angle of engagement requires a downward shot at approximately 14 degrees, which creates additional ballistic calculation challenges. And the exposure window for the target is estimated at 8 to 12 seconds. Lena was doing the math without meaning to. She couldn't help it. The variables were assembling themselves in her mind the way they always had, not as obstacles, but as a problem. A solvable problem. She caught herself. "Colonel, I haven't fired a precision rifle in 7 years. This rifle," Hayes said, nodding at the case, "is something you've never fired because it didn't exist until 4 months ago. What you know about that weapon right now from looking at it for 60 seconds is already more than most people would learn in a week. And what you know about ballistics precision shooting and applied physics." He paused. "Sergeant Carter, I've read your range records from before you enlisted. I've read everything about you that exists in any system I can access. And I've spent 2 years trying to find another option for this mission. And you're not the last resort," Hayes said carefully. "You're the specific solution to a specific problem." She looked at the rifle. She should have said no. She had built 7 years of invisibility, 7 years of quiet, 7 years of being exactly what she'd chosen to be: the woman in the armory, the weapons tech, the person nobody looked at twice. She should have said no. "I want 48 hours with the rifle before I make any decision," she said. Hayes nodded immediately. "Done." She spent those 48 hours in a way nobody on the base could explain. She didn't go to the range. She didn't fire a single round. Instead, she sat in the armory with the rifle disassembled on her workbench, and she studied it the way she had once studied the physics textbooks her grandfather had ordered for her when she was 17 and asking questions he couldn't answer. She traced the rifling with a borescope. She measured the crown geometry. She pulled the recoil system apart and rebuilt it 3 times until she understood exactly how the engineering team had solved the muzzle energy problem that came with a barrel this length. She mapped the scope's reticle system to its mathematical underpinning and reconstructed the ballistic algorithm it was built around. She also studied the valley. Hayes had given her everything: satellite imagery, weather station data from the past 18 months, temperature logs, atmospheric pressure records, wind pattern analyses from 3 different elevation points. She built the shot in her head before she ever touched the trigger. By the end of the 2nd day, Torres found her sitting in the dark with the rifle assembled on her lap, completely still, staring at nothing. "Sergeant Carter, you okay?" Lena looked up. "You know what the hardest part of a long-range shot is?" she said. Torres shook her head. "It's not the distance. It's not the wind. It's not even the math." Lena looked back at the rifle. "It's the 4 seconds before you pull the trigger when every part of your brain is screaming that this is impossible. You have to be quieter than that." Torres was quiet for a moment. "Are you going to do it?" Lena ran her thumb across the receiver. "I don't know yet," she said. But they both knew. At 1400 hours the following afternoon, Lena walked into Hayes's office and closed the door behind her. He looked up from his desk. She put both hands flat on the surface and leaned forward slightly. I'll need 3 days of preliminary range work at extended distance. I'll need complete weather station access at 4 altitude points real-time during the engagement. I'll need the ability to set my own timeline on the shot. Nobody rushes me. Nobody gives me a countdown. Nobody talks in my ear at the moment of fire. And if the conditions aren't right, I pull back. No argument, no override. Hayes said nothing for a moment, then agreed. One more thing. Name it. Lena straightened up. When this is done, I go back to my armory. No press. No debrief that goes beyond classification. No medal ceremony. No one on this base learns what happened. Hayes looked at her for a long time. You're very committed to being invisible, he said. I'm very committed to this base's weapons inventory being properly maintained, she said. Which is what I'm supposed to be doing, so let's make this fast. She turned for the door. Sergeant Carter? She stopped. Whatever made you choose this life, the armory, the invisibility, I'm not going to ask about it. That's yours. Hayes paused. But I want you to know that I've spent 31 years in this army. And in 31 years, I have never asked for something I didn't believe was possible. She kept her eyes on the door. Then let's both hope your record holds, she said, and walked out into the night. Nobody on the base noticed when she left, which was she understood exactly how it was supposed to be. She'd spent 7 years making sure she could move through this place without anyone tracking her path. Invisible in, invisible out. The vehicle was waiting. A single transport with Hayes and 2 people she didn't know and would not be introduced to. She put the rifle case in the back. She climbed in. She stared out the window at the dark mountain line ahead, and for the first time in a very long time, Lena Carter felt the old feeling come back. The one from before. The one her grandfather had first recognized in her at 16, standing at that rock outcropping with an old .308 and a steel plate 400 meters away. Not excitement. Not fear. Something older and quieter than both. The certainty of a person who understands exactly what they are. She was a shooter. She had always been a shooter. And somewhere in that dark valley ahead, at a distance that every qualified professional had agreed was impossible, a problem was waiting. And Staff Sergeant Lena Carter did not believe in impossible. She believed in variables. She believed in patience. She believed in the 4 seconds before the trigger when everything your brain tells you is wrong. She closed her eyes. She began running the calculations. The transport stopped before dawn. Lena hadn't slept. Not because she was nervous, she'd moved past nervous somewhere around the 3rd hour of calculations in her head, but because sleep felt like a waste of the time she needed. She had been running variables in the dark, the entire ride, adjusting, rebuilding, testing, each assumption against the next one, the way she always worked when the problem was genuinely difficult. Not impossible. Never impossible. Difficult was just a word for a problem that hadn't been solved yet. She stepped out into cold air and didn't wait for instruction. She already knew where she needed to go. Hayes had given her the topographical overlay 2 days ago, and she had memorized every elevation change, every distance marker, every feature of the ridge that would become her position. She picked up the rifle case herself. Nobody offered to carry it. She wouldn't have let them anyway. The team will establish a security perimeter at 400 meters, Hayes said, coming up beside her. You'll have the ridge to yourself. Good. There's an observer position 50 meters behind you. Technical support. Former SOCOM. He'll be silent unless you initiate. He'll be silent, period, Lena said. I work alone. Hayes paused. Lena. Colonel, I know this rifle. I know this shot. I've been building this firing solution for 48 hours, and the solution lives here. She touched 2 fingers to her temple. The moment someone else's voice gets into that space, the solution gets contaminated. I work alone. He looked at her for a moment. Then, understood. She walked to the ridge. The observer, whoever he was, she never asked his name, was already positioned at the secondary site. She could feel him back there the way you feel someone watching you in a quiet room. She filed him away and focused forward. The valley below was invisible in the pre-dawn dark. She didn't need to see it. She had the satellite overlay committed to memory, and the real valley, when light came, would match it in every relevant detail. Distance to target compound, 3,820 meters. Elevation differential, 312 meters downward angle of approximately 14 degrees. 3 distinct wind layer bands at different altitudes, each with its own speed and direction profile, based on 18 months of weather station data. She set up the bipod, positioned herself behind the rifle, breathed. She did not think about the man she was here to kill. She had made a conscious decision about that 2 days ago in the armory, sitting in the dark with the rifle on her lap. The decision was the target was a variable, a vector, a position at a distance. She would think about him as exactly that, and nothing more, because anything more would introduce an element she couldn't calculate, and she couldn't afford elements she couldn't calculate. She breathed. The valley slowly came out of the dark. She found the compound in the scope at 0612 hours, and then she settled in to wait. What most people don't understand about extreme long-range shooting, what even most trained military snipers don't fully understand, is that the actual trigger pull is the smallest part of the job. The shot begins hours before, sometimes days before. It begins with data collection, atmospheric modeling, ballistic calculation, and a kind of sustained mental discipline that has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with patience. You build the shot in your mind so completely that when the moment comes, your body is simply executing a decision that was already made. Lena had been building this shot for 2 days. By 700, she was ready. The target had not appeared. She waited. At 7:43, Hayes's voice came through the earpiece, the one she'd agreed to wear, but reserved the right to remove. No movement yet. Intelligence confirms he's still in the compound. Copy, she said, and went back to silence. She monitored the wind at the ridge level. She could feel it in the grass around her, read it in the way distant vegetation moved at various elevation bands. She was building a real-time composite picture of the air between her and the target, constantly updating, constantly refining. This was the part that couldn't be calculated in advance. This was the part that required presence. At 0831, Sergeant First Class Reyes's voice came across the command frequency. She recognized it instantly. "Colonel, I want to go on record again. This is a mistake. You're putting an armory worker in a shooter's position on a Tier 1 mission. When this goes wrong, that's on the command structure." Hayes's response was clipped. "Noted. Stay off this channel." Lena pulled the earpiece out. She didn't need to hear that. She already knew what Reyes thought. She'd known what Reyes thought since that Tuesday morning in the armory, and the honest truth was that it didn't matter. What mattered was the wind at 1,200 meters altitude, which had just shifted 3 degrees clockwise, and what that meant for her hold point. She adjusted, she breathed, she waited. At 0917 hours, the target appeared. He walked out of the northern end of the compound with 2 bodyguards flanking him, and stopped at a position she had predicted with reasonable accuracy based on pattern analysis from previous surveillance. He was talking to someone. He was relaxed. He had no idea that 3,820 meters away, a woman who fixed rifles for a living was looking at him through a scope that had been built to kill him specifically. Lena's heart rate dropped. This was the thing that had distinguished her from other shooters since she was 16 years old. Every other competitor she'd ever met described their heart rate spiking at the moment of engagement. Adrenaline, the body's response to pressure. They had to manage it, compensate for it, breathe through it. Lena's heart rate dropped. She didn't know why. Her grandfather had noticed it first. "Other people speed up when it counts," he'd said. "You slow down." He'd said it like it was a gift. For a long time, she hadn't been sure. Right now, it was a gift. She read the wind one final time, made a micro adjustment to her hold, confirmed her dope on the elevation turret. settled her cheek against the stock with the exact amount of pressure she'd calibrated across 40 years of muscle memory. The target was standing still. The window was opening. And then, from the secondary observer position, 50 meters behind her, a voice. "Wind's picking up. You might want to—" "Don't." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through everything. "Do not speak." Silence. She went back to the scope. The target was still there. Still talking. Still completely unaware. The wind at ridge level increased slightly. She felt it, factored it. The composition in her head updated in real time. She found the hold point. She found the stillness beneath the stillness. She pulled the trigger. The rifle moved. The sound was enormous and immediately irrelevant. She stayed on the scope, stayed with the crosshairs on the point of aim, stayed completely still. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The target dropped. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies. He simply folded at the knees and went down, and the 2 bodyguards beside him didn't even react for a full half-second, because the shot had arrived without warning, and the human brain requires time to process what the eyes are seeing. Lena pulled back from the scope. She did not exhale dramatically. She did not close her eyes. She did not feel triumph or relief or any of the emotions she might have expected. She felt the particular cold clarity of a calculation that had produced the correct answer. The shot had worked because the physics had worked. She had done her job. She began breaking down the rifle. Behind her, the observer was already on the radio. She could hear fragments of his voice, confirmed target down single round, and she knew that in Hayes's position, the information was already being transmitted up the chain, already becoming something larger than one shot on one ridge. She didn't listen. She packed the case. She was done. Except she wasn't. Because 40 seconds after the target dropped, something happened that no amount of calculation had predicted. The compound's northern wall came down. Not from her shot. She was still processing the information when it registered. The wall simply collapsed outward. And from within it, a secondary structure became visible that had not appeared on any satellite imagery, which meant it had been deliberately concealed from overhead observation, which meant the intelligence preparation for this mission had been incomplete, in a way that someone somewhere had made sure of. She had the scope back up before she consciously decided to raise it. What she saw through the glass changed the nature of everything that was happening. There were men coming out of the concealed structure. Not in response to her shot. They were too organized, too purposeful, too already moving for that. They had been ready before her bullet arrived. They were dressed in civilian clothes but moving in tactical formations that no civilian used. And they were moving toward a position on the valley floor that on the topographical overlay she had memorized corresponded exactly to the approach route of a ranger patrol that Hayes had mentioned in passing during the mission briefing. In passing, as background context. She was on the earpiece before she had fully assembled the thought. Hayes, there's a secondary element. Concealed structure northern wall. They knew we were operating in this valley. A pause. Say again. Someone told them. The ranger patrol on approach route Delta, they're walking into a prepared position. You need to redirect them now. Another pause. Longer. She heard voices in the background of Hayes's channel, arguing. Someone saying her name in a tone that wasn't respectful. Then Hayes. Carter, are you certain? I'm looking at it through a 35 power scope at 3,820 meters, and I'm telling you what I see. How certain do you need me to be? The arguing in the background got louder. Then a different voice on the channel, Reyes, somehow on Hayes's frequency. Colonel, this is the problem I flagged. She's interpreting what she's seeing through a weapon she's never fired in a combat context. She made a lucky shot, and now she thinks she's a tactical analyst. The Ranger Patrol is not... Reyes. Hayes's voice was sharp. Stand down. Sir, I'm telling you. I said stand down. A pause. Then Hayes to her. Lena. How many in the secondary element? 12, maybe 14, moving fast. They have at least 6 minutes before the patrol enters the kill zone, probably less. Hayes was quiet for 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a long time when the math is moving against you. Redirecting the patrol now. She heard him issue the order. Heard the response come back confirming receipt. Heard the timeline and the vectors and the adjustments happening in real time across the command network. She kept the scope on the secondary element. They reached their prepared position in the valley floor. They waited. The Ranger Patrol redirected came through a different route. No contact. Lena watched the secondary element hold their position for 11 minutes before the discipline broke, and they began moving again, and this time they were moving fast without tactical formation, and that told her everything she needed to know about what they'd expected to happen and what had failed to happen. She broke down the rifle again. Her hands were steady. Her heart rate was if anything slower than it had been during the shot. She picked up the case. She walked back down the ridge to where Hayes was standing with 2 other officers and an expression she couldn't fully read. "The patrol is safe," he said. "Good. You saved 12 soldiers. I made 1 shot. Your patrol stayed alive because you made the right call in the right window." She set the case down. "I need to go back to base." "Lena, I need to go back to my armory, Colonel. I have an inventory audit on Thursday, and Reyes probably damaged something he didn't log." One of the other officers, a lieutenant colonel she didn't know, stared at her. "You just made the longest confirmed shot in American military history, and you're worried about an inventory audit." Lena looked at him. "I made a shot at a distance. The record belongs to the rifle as much as the shooter. The inventory audit belongs to me." She picked up the case. "Are we done here?" They were not done. She just didn't know it yet. The ride back to base was quiet, in the way that quiet is sometimes louder than noise. Hayes sat across from her and said nothing for the first 40 minutes. The 2 people she didn't know were equally silent. She looked out the window and ran the morning back through her mind, not searching for errors, because she didn't make the kind of errors you found afterward, but processing, closing the loop. The way her grandfather had taught her to break down a session after every range day, methodically, honestly filing each decision into its correct category. The shot had worked. The secondary element, the concealed structure, the prepared ambush, that was not something she had done. That was something she had seen. There was a difference. What she couldn't stop thinking about was the timing. The secondary element had been in position before her shot. They had been moving to the ambush site before the target dropped, which meant the sequence of events had been choreographed in advance, not a response, a plan. Someone had known the Ranger Patrol's route. Someone had known the timing of the operation. Someone had positioned 14 men in a concealed structure beneath a compound that satellite imagery had failed to show or had been made to fail to show. She kept that thought to herself, for now. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known sitting in that vehicle watching the mountains pass, was that the shot she'd made that morning was already moving through channels she had no visibility into. Hayes was managing it carefully, she could tell from the way he'd handled the communications. But careful management only goes so far when a weapons technician from FOB Meridian makes the longest confirmed shot in American military history and saves a 12-man Ranger Patrol from a prepared ambush in the same morning. Things like that don't stay quiet. By the time they reached base, 3 separate intelligence units had requested a debrief. A Special Operations Command liaison had called twice. And somewhere in a network, Lena didn't have clearance to see a report had been filed that attached her name to the morning's events in ways she hadn't agreed to and hadn't been told about. She didn't know any of this when she walked back into her armory at 13:47 hours and found Torres standing at the cleaning station with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and failing. "Sergeant Carter," Torres said carefully. "You're back." "Apparently." Lena set the rifle case on the secure rack and began signing it back into inventory. "Is there a problem with the weapons log I need to know about?" Torres opened her mouth, closed it. "No, Sergeant, the log is fine." "Good." Lena finished the entry, picked up her clipboard. "Then let's talk about the M249 that Reyes's team signed out last week. I want to know its current status, and I want to know in writing." Torres grabbed her notepad, and Lena Carter went back to work, as if nothing had happened, as if this morning had been any other morning, as if she hadn't 12 hours ago, quietly and without ceremony, done something that would eventually change the course of everything she thought she'd left behind. She filed the shot away in the same place she filed everything she didn't know what to do with yet. In the back. In the quiet. In the part of herself she'd been protecting for 7 years. She picked up a maintenance log. She began to read. But the thought she couldn't file away the one that kept surfacing, no matter how many times she pushed it down, was the secondary element. The concealed structure. The timing. 14 men in position before the shot. A ranger patrol on a route that someone had told them. And a mission that had been designed, she was increasingly certain of this, to accomplish 2 things at the same time. She looked at the maintenance log without seeing it. One of those things was the target she'd eliminated. The other thing, the second purpose of the morning, the one nobody had briefed her on, she was still working out. And the working out of it, she was beginning to understand, was going to be far more dangerous than the shot. She put the maintenance log down. She looked at the wall. Then she picked up a pen and began writing something that had nothing to do with weapons inventory. A sequence. A timeline. The things she had seen through the scope, and the order in which she had seen them, and what the order meant if you applied the same cold logic to it that you applied to a ballistics problem. She wrote for 20 minutes. Then she looked at what she'd written. Then she folded the paper, put it in her inside chest pocket, buttoned the pocket closed, and picked the maintenance log back up. She would think about this more tonight. She would think about it carefully, methodically, the way she thought about everything. Because she was beginning to understand that what had happened this morning was not finished. The shot was finished. What the shot had started was just beginning. And somewhere on this base, in an office, or a bunk room, or a vehicle heading away from her right now, someone was already thinking about what to do with the woman who had seen too much and survived to come back and report it. She went back to the maintenance log. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. That was the thing about Lena Carter that nobody in that armory, nobody on that base, nobody in the command structure above her had ever fully understood. She was not calm because she didn't feel the danger. She was calm because feeling the danger and functioning anyway was something she'd been doing since she was 16 years old, standing at a rock outcropping in West Texas with an old rifle in her hands and a steel plate 400 meters away, learning from a man who understood her better than anyone that the most important distance in shooting wasn't between the barrel and the target. It was between the fear and the trigger. And Lena Carter had that distance mastered. 3 months is a long time to pretend nothing happened. Lena had gotten good at it, better than she expected, which said something she wasn't sure she wanted to hear about herself. She went back to the armory. She ran her inventory. She filed her maintenance logs. She corrected Reyes's team's paperwork once for a missing serial number, once for a scope that had been returned with a cracked mount that nobody had reported, and she ate alone and ran her 5 miles and slept her 6 hours and did not think about the valley, except that she thought about it constantly. The folded paper from the morning of the shot was still in her inside chest pocket. She'd transferred it from uniform to uniform for 3 months without unfolding it because she didn't need to unfold it. Every word on it was already memorized. She kept it because throwing it away felt like the kind of thing you did when you'd decided something was over. She hadn't decided that. What she had decided, after 3 months of watching the base operate around her in its normal rhythms, was that whatever had happened in that valley was not finished. Not in the way that operations finish, when the debrief is filed and the report is classified, and the personnel involved go back to their regular assignments. Something was still moving. She could feel it the way you feel a weapon that isn't properly seated, not obviously broken, not making noise, just slightly wrong in a way that only registers when you know what right feels like. She knew what right felt like. This wasn't it. The first sign was Reyes. 3 weeks after the mission, he'd stopped coming into the armory personally. Sent junior soldiers instead. Sent Torres to collect weapons he'd previously picked up himself. That was new. Reyes was the kind of man who showed up in person because showing up in person was how he reminded you that he existed and outranked you. The absence of that behavior meant something had changed in his calculation. She filed it. The second sign was Hayes. He came to see her once, 6 weeks after the mission on a Tuesday afternoon. He stood at her counter and asked about a routine weapons assessment, and they talked about it for 12 minutes, and he left. Normal. Completely normal. Except that Hayes had never come to her armory for a routine weapons assessment before the mission, and the fact that he was doing it now meant he was checking on her in the only way that didn't look like checking on her. She filed that too. The third sign was the one she couldn't file. It was a name. A name she hadn't heard before the mission, and started hearing quietly in the margins of conversations, in the half-sentences that stopped when she walked past. Ranger Sergeant Noah Walker. She caught it first from 2 intelligence specialists talking in the corridor near her armory, who went silent the moment they registered she was there. She caught it second from Hayes's radio operator, who she'd overheard saying, "the Walker situation," to someone on the other end of a secured line before he noticed her and turned away. She caught it third from Torres, who had mentioned with the studied casualness of someone who had been specifically told not to mention it that there'd been a memorial service for a ranger who'd gone missing after an operation. After the operation. Her operation. She stopped filing things and started connecting them. It was on a Wednesday morning, 79 days after the shot, that Captain Ethan Walker walked into her armory. She knew who he was before he introduced himself. Not because she'd seen his face before, but because she'd been a student of people for 34 years, and she could read the specific combination of grief and controlled fury in a person's bearing the way she could read wind. He was maybe 31. Army Ranger. His left arm was in a partial brace that he was carrying with the studied nonchalance of someone who'd been told to rest it and had no intention of doing so. He had his brother's face. She didn't know that yet, but she would, and he had the eyes of someone who hadn't slept well in months, but had made peace with that because sleep felt like an endorsement of something he couldn't endorse. He came in, looked at her directly, and said, "Staff Sergeant Carter, my name is Captain Ethan Walker. I need 5 minutes." She looked at him. She set down her pen. "I know who you are," she said. He went very still. "Then you know why I'm here." "I have a guess." She came around the counter, looked at the door. "Torres, take the rest of the morning." Torres looked between them and gathered her things without a word. The door closed. Lena turned back to Ethan Walker and crossed her arms. "Talk," she said. He took a breath. Not the breath of someone composing themselves, the breath of someone who had been holding a very specific sentence in their chest for a very long time and was finally releasing it. "My brother Noah was on the Ranger Patrol that was operating in the valley the same morning you made your shot. He was team leader on a 6-man element. The patrol was redirected at the last minute, your intelligence, I was told, though nobody will confirm that officially, and the redirect saved 5 of the 6 men." She waited. Noah didn't make it back. He was separated during a secondary contact engagement after the redirect. Official report says missing in action, presumed dead. He stopped. "I don't believe the official report." "Why not?" "Because the official report was filed 18 hours after the contact. Standard MIA report takes 72 hours minimum to process. Someone wanted Noah's status classified quickly." Lena said nothing. She was watching his face the way she watched everything, not looking for what he was showing her, but for what he was trying not to show her. What she saw was a man who was frightened. Not of her, not of this conversation, of what he'd already found. "What else?" she said. Ethan reached into his jacket. He pulled out a single printed page, a communications intercept partially redacted, and set it on her counter. "This came through an unofficial channel. Someone who owed me. I can't tell you more than that." He tapped the page. "This is an intercepted enemy communication from 4 days after the operation. The translation mentions an American ghost operating in the northern mountain corridor. A lone operator. Confirmed American military. Confirmed alive." Lena picked up the page, read it, read it again. "This is Noah," she said. It wasn't a question. "I believe so. Why hasn't this been reported up the chain?" "It has been. I reported it personally to my battalion S2 6 weeks ago." He paused. 3 days later, I was reassigned to a non-operational advisory role pending medical clearance. He held up the braced arm briefly. "I got this in a training accident. Nothing serious. Not the kind of thing that gets you pulled from operational status." The armory went quiet. Lena set the page down. She walked to the door, checked the corridor, came back. "You're saying someone pulled you from operational status to keep you from looking for your brother?" "I'm saying the timing is difficult to explain any other way." "Who has the authority to make that kind of reassignment?" "Someone above my battalion commander." She looked at the page again, at the redacted portions, at the shape of what was missing as much as what was there. "Captain Walker," she said carefully, "what exactly are you asking me to do?" He looked at her directly. "I'm asking you to tell me what you saw from that ridge, not what went into the official report, what you actually saw." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached into her inside chest pocket and unfolded a piece of paper for the first time in 79 days. She put it on the counter between them. He looked at it. At the handwriting, her handwriting dense and precise, a timeline running down the left margin, observations in the center column, questions on the right. He looked up at her. "You already knew something was wrong," he said. "I knew something was wrong about 4 minutes after I made the shot. And you didn't report it. I reported what I could confirm. What I saw through the scope, the secondary element, the concealed structure, the tactical positioning that went to Hayes. What I couldn't confirm was the interpretation, the why." She tapped the right column of the paper. "The questions. That's what I didn't report. Because the interpretation required information I didn't have access to. And now," she looked at the intercept he'd brought, "now I have some of it." What she told him then took 40 minutes. She walked him through everything, not just the shot, but the preparation. The mission briefing, every detail Hayes had given her, and every detail Hayes had left out, the secondary element and its timing. The way they'd been positioned before her bullet arrived, the concealed structure that no intelligence asset had flagged. She told him about the timing problem. The thing that had been sitting in the back of her mind for 3 months, quiet and cold and waiting for the right context. The secondary element had been in position before the target dropped. That meant they'd known the operation was happening. That meant the intelligence had been leaked in advance. That meant someone with access to the mission parameters had passed that information to the enemy, not accidentally, not through a security lapse, but deliberately. Because the positioning of that element wasn't defensive, it was offensive. It was designed to catch the Ranger patrol in a kill zone during the chaos created by the shot. "Someone used my shot as a distraction," she said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "They used the mission to try to eliminate the patrol." "Yes." "Why?" She looked at the questions column on her paper. "That's the part I haven't been able to answer. The target I eliminated. What do you know about him beyond the official designation?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking about how much to say. "Officially, enemy commander. Weapons supply network. Threat to American forces." He stopped. "Unofficially, and this is from my own intelligence work in the 2 months before I got pulled, Malik wasn't just a weapons supplier. He was a middleman, a broker between suppliers and buyers." He looked at her. "Some of those buyers were not who you'd expect." "American contractors," she said. He blinked. "How did you—" "The ammunition records." She moved to a filing cabinet, pulled it open, extracted a folder, set it on the counter. "I run this armory. I track every round that comes in and every round that goes out. 3 months ago, right around the time this mission was being planned, I found a discrepancy. Not big enough to flag automatically. Small enough to be a data entry error. I flagged it anyway because I flag everything." She opened the folder. 742 rounds of .338 Lapua Magnum signed out to a forward support element. Unit designation I didn't recognize. I cross-referenced it. The unit didn't exist. Ethan stared at the file. Someone was using your armory to move ammunition. Someone was using my armory to move ammunition, she confirmed. And whoever Malik was brokering for, they needed a very specific caliber that is not standard infantry issue. It's precision rifle ammunition, the kind you use for long-range, targeted killings, Ethan said. The word sat between them, at between. If Malik was handling transactions that connected American military supply chains to private assassination operations, Lena said carefully, then eliminating him wasn't just about stopping weapons routes to enemy forces. It was about closing a witness. Ethan's voice dropped. And Noah's team. Noah's team was one of the units that had been active in the northern corridor for 6 months. If they'd seen things, supply transfers, contacts, movements, if there was a reason to believe they'd assembled enough operational intelligence to become a problem for whoever was running this, they weren't being eliminated because of the mission, Ethan said. His voice was very controlled now, which meant it was the most dangerous it had been in this conversation. They were being eliminated because of what they knew. That's my working hypothesis, Lena said. I can't prove it yet. Yet, he said. She closed the folder. She looked at him. Your brother is alive, she said. I believe that. The intercept supports it, and the timeline of the official report supports it. And if someone moved fast to classify his status, that means his status was inconvenient. People who are actually dead aren't inconvenient. Ethan exhaled. It was the first time in this entire conversation that his composure had shifted even slightly. I've been saying that for 3 months, he said. Nobody will listen. I'm listening, Lena said. But you need to understand what listening means from where I'm standing. If I start pulling on this thread, the ammunition discrepancy, the mission parameters, the secondary element, I'm not going to be able to control where it goes. This isn't an armory problem I can fix with a maintenance log. I know that. This goes somewhere very high. The people who designed this operation had access to classified mission parameters, satellite intelligence feeds, and ranger patrol routes. That's not a private contractor working alone. That's someone inside the command structure. I know that too, Ethan said. Why do you think I came to you instead of going up the chain? She picked up the intercept page, looked at it one more time. If we do this, she said, we do it right. We document everything. We move carefully. We don't show anyone what we have until we have enough that showing it creates more danger for them than staying quiet creates for us. Agreed. And we find Noah. Yes. She looked at him. Because if he's out there and he's alive, he's been collecting the same evidence we have. And if the people behind this figure that out before we do, he becomes a problem that needs to be closed, Ethan finished. The armory was very quiet. Lena folded the paper back up and put it in her pocket. Then she picked up Ethan's intercept page and folded it into the same pocket. I need access to your battalion's mission logs from the 6 months before the operation, she said. Everything Noah's team filed. Contact reports, supply requests, anything. I can get it. It'll take 4 days. Oh, 4 days is fine. In 4 days, I'll have the ammunition trail documented thoroughly enough that even with a partial mission log, we'll be able to establish the connection. She moved back behind the counter. Started pulling files. In the meantime, I need you to be careful. Don't ask questions through official channels. Don't request information in writing. Don't tell anyone you came here. Understood? He started for the door, then stopped, turned back. Sergeant Carter, why are you doing this? Officially, this has nothing to do with you. You made your shot. You came back to your armory. Nobody would expect you to... Your brother's patrol was redirected because of information I gave, she said, without looking up from the files. 5 men survived because of it. If Noah got separated and is still alive out there because my information changed his position at the wrong moment. She stopped. That's my math. I do my own math. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you, he said. She didn't answer. She heard the door open and close. She stood alone in the armory for a moment with her hands flat on the counter and her eyes on the middle distance and the weight of everything she'd just committed to settling across her shoulders like a piece of equipment she hadn't worn in a long time. Heavy, but familiar. She began to work. Over the following 9 days, Lena Carter conducted the most important inventory audit of her career. Nobody knew that. To every person on the base who observed her during those 9 days, she was doing exactly what she always did. Running the armory, processing paperwork, fielding requests, maintaining weapons, being the woman in the background that nobody paid attention to. What she was actually doing was building a case file that would have made a federal investigator nervous. The ammunition discrepancy was the spine of it. She pulled every record going back 14 months, cross-referenced every checkout entry against unit designations in the official order of battle, found 6 separate instances where ammunition had moved through her armory on paperwork signed by units that didn't appear in any personnel roster she could access. Different calibers, different quantities. But a pattern: always precision rifle ammunition, always signed out in quantities too small to flag automatic review thresholds, but too large to be individual training allotments. Someone had been using her armory as a ghost supply line for over a year. Someone who knew her documentation systems well enough to stay below her detection thresholds. Almost. She found the first name on the 10th day. Not a name attached to the ammunition records directly, they'd been too careful for that. But a name on a secondary authorization form buried in the approval chain for a weapons transfer she'd processed 18 months ago and hadn't thought about since. A name that appeared nowhere in her current unit roster and nowhere in the current command hierarchy. She recognized it anyway, because she'd heard it once in passing during the mission briefing. A name Hayes had mentioned, and then not mentioned again, in the particular way you mention something to establish a connection and then let it go before the listener can attach weight to it. Major Daniel Forsyth. Logistics Coordination, Special Operations Support. She wrote the name at the top of a new sheet of paper. She began building down from it. 4 days later, Ethan was back. He came in at 17-20 hours, close enough to the end of the working day that there was nobody else in the armory. He looked different than the first time, less controlled, more urgent, with the specific energy of someone who has found something they were looking for and isn't entirely glad they found it. He put a folder on the counter. Noah's mission logs, 6 months. She opened it, started reading. She read for 11 minutes without speaking. Ethan stood on the other side of the counter and watched her face. He saw it, she said without looking up. What? 3 months before the operation. She turned the log to face him, pointed. Contact report, Northern Corridor. Observation of a vehicle transfer. He logged it as a possible civilian supply chain irregularity. Recommended follow-up investigation. She turned to the next page. Follow-up was denied. Report was filed classified and buried. Ethan read it. Who denied the follow-up? She turned to the authorization stamp at the bottom of the denial notice. Major Daniel Forsyth. Ethan stared at the name. You know him, she said. It wasn't a question. He came to our battalion 3 times in the 6 months before the operation, coordinating support logistics. Ethan's voice was flat in the particular way that voices go flat when emotion is being compressed at high pressure. He was at the briefing the night before the patrol went out. The armory felt very small suddenly. He knew the patrol route, Lena said. He helped plan the patrol route, Ethan said. They looked at each other. He's not working alone, Lena said. Someone at his level doesn't design an operation this size without authority above him. How far above? She thought about the weapons transfers, the scale of the supply chain, the number of missions that had been threaded through her armory without triggering review, the resources required to conceal a secondary structure from satellite intelligence, the speed with which Noah Walker's status had been classified. Far, she said. Far enough that we need to be very careful about who we trust with what we have. Ethan nodded slowly. He was processing. She could see it, the particular look of a person reorganizing their understanding of a situation they thought they understood, finding the new shape of it. Hayes, he said finally. You trust Hayes? She thought about that. I trust that Hayes sent me on that mission because he believed it was legitimate, she said carefully. I trust that the redirected patrol was his call made in good faith on my information. Whether Hayes knows what's underneath this, she stopped. I don't know yet. We need to know. Yes. She closed the folder. But not yet. Not until we have more. She looked at him steadily. And not until we know where Noah is. Because that was the piece that changed everything. Not the ammunition records. Not Forsyth's name. Not the supply chain or the denied follow-up or the classified status filed in 18 hours. All of that was evidence. All of that was buildable. But Noah Walker alive in the northern mountains was something else. Noah Walker was a witness. A living operational witness who had been out there for 3 months, and if he'd survived this long, it meant he was doing exactly what Lena's instincts told her he was doing, collecting the same evidence she was collecting, from a much closer distance. We have to find him, she said. Before they do. Ethan looked at her. His voice was quiet and completely certain. Then let's go find him. Finding Noah Walker was not going to happen through official channels. They both knew that before they started. Official channels had classified his status in 18 hours, denied his team's follow-up reports, and reassigned his brother to a non-operational role to keep him from asking uncomfortable questions. Official channels were part of the problem, so they built their own. It took 11 days to assemble what they needed. Lena worked her side of it from the armory, pulling everything she could access through legitimate weapons and logistics, documentation, cross-referencing supply routes, building the geographic picture of where the Northern Corridor operations had moved in the months since the mission. Ethan worked his side from a borrowed laptop in a storage room 2 buildings over, using contacts from 3 years of Ranger deployments who would respond to a personal message but wouldn't touch an official request with someone else's hands. They didn't meet in person during those 11 days. They passed information through Torres, who Lena had finally read in on day 3. Not everything, not the full picture, but enough. Torres had looked at her for a long moment when she finished and said very quietly, "My cousin was in a Ranger battalion. He came home fine, but I always thought about the ones who didn't, and why." "This is why some of them didn't," Lena said. Torres nodded once. "What do you need me to do?" She'd been indispensable since. The geographic picture that emerged from 11 days of careful work was not what Lena expected. She'd assumed Noah, if alive, would be moving, staying ahead of anyone searching for him, changing position constantly, working his way back toward friendly territory. That was the survival doctrine. That was what the training said. Noah Walker was not moving. He was stationary, cycling through 3 fixed positions in a 14-kilometer range of the Northern Corridor. The pattern was visible in the signal intelligence data that Ethan's contact, a signals analyst who owed him a favor of the kind that doesn't get discussed openly, had managed to pull from a non-official source. Intermittent brief using a frequency and encryption protocol that wasn't in current military issue. He built his own communications setup, Ethan said when the data came through. His voice had something in it that was hard to read, equal parts pride and raw emotion, compressed into 4 words. "He's not trying to get out," Lena said. "No. He's staying in place because he has a reason to stay." Ethan looked at the position data. At the 14-kilometer range. At the 3 fixed points, arranged in a triangle around a specific geographic feature that when Lena pulled the topographical overlay, resolved into something that made the back of her neck go cold. "That's the compound," she said. "Not Malik's compound. The secondary site. The one that wasn't on the satellite imagery." "He found it," Ethan said. "He found it, and he's watching it." She studied the triangle of positions. "He's been watching it for 3 months, which means whatever is in that compound is worth watching for 3 months," Ethan said. "Even alone. Even without support." They looked at each other. "He found the proof," Lena said. Not a question. A conclusion reached by 2 people doing the same math from different directions and arriving at the same answer. Getting to him required a vehicle, a cover reason for leaving the base, and a route that didn't put them through any checkpoint where their names might generate a flag. Ethan handled the vehicle and the route. Lena handled the cover a weapons assessment request for a forward support position that she filed through her normal documentation chain. Legitimate in every detail, the kind of routine administrative movement that nobody looked at twice. They left at 04:30 on a Thursday morning. Torres had the armory covered. Hayes, who Lena still hadn't fully read and still wasn't sure about, would see a routine movement log if he checked nothing more. The drive was 3 hours. They didn't talk much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because they'd both learned independently and for different reasons that the hours before something difficult were better spent in the quiet than in words that didn't help anything. Somewhere around the second hour, Ethan said, "He's going to be different." Lena glanced at him. 3 months alone out here, Ethan said. Even for Noah, especially for Noah, that changes a person. I need you to know that I know that. Whatever we find when we find him, whatever shape he's in, he's still my brother, and we're still going to listen to what he has. I know that, Lena said. I just needed to say it out loud. She nodded. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The contact protocol had been established through the signals channel. 3 clicks on a specific frequency at a specific time. If Noah was monitoring, and Ethan was certain he would respond with 2 clicks and a position bearing. They'd gone over it twice. It was simple, because simple was what worked under pressure. Ethan sent the signal. 22 seconds of silence, then 2 clicks, then a bearing. Ethan exhaled. Just once. Short and controlled. Lena said nothing. She was already recalculating the route. They found him 40 minutes later. He came out of cover from a position she hadn't been able to see until he was 10 meters away, which told her immediately that his fieldcraft, after 3 months alone, had not degraded, it had sharpened. He was lean in a way that wasn't healthy, carrying weight differently than a person carries it when they're eating regularly. But his eyes were clear and his movements were deliberate and precise. And when he looked at his brother, he held his face completely still for exactly 2 seconds before something broke through. Not dramatically, not with tears, just a slight involuntary change around the eyes and jaw that meant the part of him that had been holding itself closed for 3 months had cracked open just for a moment and then closed again. Ethan grabbed him by the shoulders. They stayed like that for several seconds without speaking. Then Noah stepped back, looked at Lena. He studied her face for a moment with the particular focus of someone who has been alone long enough that reading a new person feels both necessary and overwhelming. "You're Carter," he said. "Yes." "You made the shot." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "That shot saved my life," he said. She opened her mouth to say what she wasn't sure. To apologize, maybe, which was the impulse she'd been carrying for 3 months. The belief that her bullet had set everything in motion, that the chaos of that morning had been her doing. Noah read it in her face before she spoke. "Don't," he said. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. The ambush was set before you fired. The plan was already in motion. Your shot didn't create the chaos. The chaos created your opportunity to warn Hayes. Without that redirect, my entire team dies in the valley." He held her gaze. "You understand, all 6 of us, not 5. 6. She absorbed that. "You knew about the secondary element," she said. "I'd been watching that compound for 2 weeks before the operation. I knew it was there. I knew what was in it. I tried to report it through official channels and got buried." His voice went flat. "By the time the operation was active and my team was in the valley, I was trying to find a way to get a warning out without compromising the mission. Then your redirect came through, and it bought us enough confusion to break contact. I got separated, going after documentation I'd cached near the compound." "You went back for evidence," Ethan said. "I went back for evidence," Noah confirmed. "And then I couldn't get out because they locked the corridor down within 6 hours of the operation. Someone moved very fast." "Forsyth," Lena said. Noah's eyes sharpened. "You found him." "We found him. Ammunition records denied follow-up authorizations, mission log cross-references." She studied his face. "You have more than that. I have 3 months more than that. He glanced at Ethan. I have names, transactions, and I have a location. Ethan went very still. A location for what? Lena asked. Noah looked at her steadily. There's a compound 12 kilometers northeast, secondary site different from the one in the valley. This one is active. They've been moving equipment in and out for 6 weeks. Not weapons. Documentation, financial records. The kind of thing you move when you're preparing to disappear. They know someone's building a case, Lena said. They suspect it. They don't know how much has been compromised yet. He looked between them. But they're moving fast. If that compound goes clean before we have what's in it, we lose the financial trail, Lena said. We lose everything that connects the transactions to the people authorizing them. The ammunition records, the mission logs, the intercepts. Without the financial documentation, it's all circumstantial. Compelling, but circumstantial. With it, he stopped. With it, there's no defense. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, and Lena felt the weight of the situation reorganize itself around this new information. The shape of it had changed. What had been an investigation, careful, methodical, document by document, had just become something with a time limit. How long do we have? She asked. Based on the movement pattern I've been observing, 72 hours. Maybe less. She looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at her. We need Hayes, he said. We need to know if Hayes can be trusted first, she said. Lena, I'm not saying he can't be. I'm saying we need to know before we walk into his office with everything we have. Because if there's any connection between Hayes and Forsyth that we haven't found yet, we hand him this and we hand everything to the wrong person. Ethan held her gaze. Noah said quietly, She's right. Ethan looked at his brother. You know something about Hayes, he said. Noah was quiet for a moment. I know that Hayes requested the investigation into Malik's network 6 months before the operation. His request, his intelligence assessment, his insistence that the mission was necessary. The mission went through channels that Forsyth controlled. He paused. I've been trying to determine for 3 months whether Hayes was used or whether he was complicit. And, Lena asked. I think he was used, Noah said. I think the mission parameters were genuine on his end and compromised somewhere between his office and field execution, but I can't be certain. Certain enough to risk everything on? Ethan asked. That's not a question I can answer for you, Noah said. They were all quiet. Lena made the decision the way she made every decision. Not dramatically, not with hesitation, but with the particular clean certainty of a person who has run every variable she has access to and accepted that the remaining uncertainty is non-reducible and therefore not a reason to wait. We go to Hayes, she said. But we don't give him everything at once. We give him the minimum necessary to authorize a secured operation targeting that compound. We hold back the documentation that connects Forsyth directly until we see how Hayes responds. If his first move is to protect the operation, we're right. If his first move is to protect Forsyth, she stopped. Then we know, and we go somewhere else with what we have. Noah looked at her for a long moment. You think like this naturally, he said. I run an armory, she said. The weapons are the same, the variables are different. He almost smiled, not quite. Let's move, he said. Getting back to base with Noah required a second vehicle and a cover that Ethan assembled on the fly, a casualty recovery protocol that in the documentation described a disoriented soldier found near a forward position who was being brought in for medical assessment. The form was real. The signatures were legitimate. The story was something nobody would look at hard because nobody wanted to be the person who questioned a casualty recovery in writing. Torres met them at a secondary vehicle entrance at 1840 hours. She looked at Noah, once registered the state of him, and said nothing except, this way. They had 4 hours before Hayes' schedule would allow a meeting that didn't generate a record. They spent those 4 hours organizing everything they had. Lena laid out the ammunition records and the supply chain documentation. Ethan laid out the mission logs and the intercepts. Noah laid out 3 months of handwritten observation notes, 2 SD cards containing photographs he'd taken from his position near the compound, and a single folded document that turned out to be a partial financial ledger recovered from the compound in the valley during the extraction chaos of the original mission. They looked at everything spread across the table. "This is enough," Ethan said. "This is almost enough," Lena said. "The compound gives us the rest. If we can get to it, we can get to it." She organized the documents into 2 groups, what they would show Hayes and what they would hold back. "But we need Hayes to authorize the approach. We can't move on a fixed compound with 3 people and no operational support." "He's going to ask how we got this," Ethan said. "Yes. And Noah's status is still officially MIA. Yes. So walking into Hayes's office with your MIA brother and a weapons tech carrying evidence of a conspiracy that involves his own command structure is going to be complicated," Lena said. "I was going to say insane." "Complicated and insane are not mutually exclusive." She looked at him steadily. "You have a better option." He didn't answer. Noah had been quiet through this exchange, reading through his own notes, cross-referencing against Lena's ammunition records. He looked up. "There's something else," he said. His voice had changed slightly, the particular tone of someone who has just confirmed something they hoped they were wrong about. Lena looked at him. "The ledger." He held it up. The partial financial document he'd recovered from the valley. "I've been working through it for 3 months. The transactions are coded supplier designations, not names. I've been able to decode 6 of the 8 supplier codes using the patterns in the transaction data." He set it down on the table. One of the supplier codes appears 14 times, largest single volume in the ledger. The code is a 3-letter prefix I've seen in one other place. He looked at Lena. "Your armory's unit designation prefix," he said. The table went very quiet. Lena looked at the ledger, at the prefix, at 14 transactions running back 22 months. "Someone was running a supply operation through my armory and logging it against my unit designation," she said. Her voice was completely flat. "Without my knowledge." "Yes." "Which means if this ledger surfaces without context, it looks like you were running it," Noah said. "I know you weren't. The transaction methodology doesn't match your documentation style. You're too precise, too detailed. Whoever built these entries was competent, but not you." He held her gaze. "But without explanation, and without someone who knows your work to confirm the inconsistency, the ledger reads as a record of Lena Carter moving weapons through the black market." The full weight of it landed. They had built a case against Forsyth and whoever was above him. And Forsyth, or someone at Forsyth's direction, had simultaneously built a case against Lena Carter. "Insurance," Ethan said. His voice was hard. "Standard operational security for something this size," Noah said. "You make sure the person most likely to expose you is the person who looks most guilty if anything surfaces." Lena was quiet for a moment. She thought about the 7 years she'd spent building her invisibility. The carefully maintained distance between who she was and who she had been. The armory that had been her shelter, her structure, her controlled world. Someone had been inside it the entire time. Using it. Using her name. She felt something shift in her chest. Not collapse, not break, but reorganize. The way a structure reorganizes when weight is applied to it correctly. Something became load-bearing that hadn't been before. "Then we move tonight," she said. Ethan looked at her sharply. "That's not the plan. We were going to approach Hayes first." "That was before I knew I was already the suspect in someone else's file," she said. "The moment Forsyth feels threatened, the moment anything we do signals that we're close, that ledger goes somewhere official, and I'm not in a position to defend it. The only thing that protects me, that protects all of us, is the compound. The financial documentation in that compound is the context that makes the ledger make sense. Without it, that prefix is my unit designation and my problem." She looked at them both. "We go to Hayes tonight with enough to get operational authorization. We move on the compound before anyone with reason to stop us knows we're moving." Noah stood up. I know 3 approach vectors, he said. Defenders at the compound are 6 to 8 based on current observation. 2 exterior positions, 1 elevated. The documentation is in a secondary structure northeast corner. You've been planning this, Ethan said. I've been planning this for 3 months, Noah said. I just didn't have a sniper. He looked at Lena. She looked back at him. I'm a weapons technician, she said. You're the best shot I've ever seen evidence of in my career, he said. And I've been a ranger for 9 years. Stop arguing semantics. She picked up the first group of documents, the ones for Hayes. Then let's go have a conversation with a colonel, she said. Hayes's expression, when the 3 of them walked into his office at 2140 hours, went through 4 distinct phases in approximately 2 seconds. Recognition. Confusion. Then when he registered Noah Walker standing alive in his office, something that Lena read as genuine shock. Not the calculated reaction of a man protecting a secret. The real thing. She filed that. Positive indicator. Sergeant Walker, Hayes said. His voice was careful. You're officially missing, Noah said. I know. We need to fix that. But first we need to fix something else. He looked at Hayes directly. Sir, how well do you know Major Daniel Forsyth? Hayes went very still. Why are you asking me that? Because the answer tells us how this conversation goes next, Lena said. Hayes looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. The particular expression of a man who has been operating in a situation he understood to be complicated and is now realizing it was more complicated than that. He sat back. Tell me what you have, he said. Lena opened the folder, and the conversation that would determine everything began. Hayes read for 19 minutes without speaking. Read for 19. Lena watched him do it. Not the documents. Him. The way his hands moved when he turned a page. The places where he slowed down. The 2 separate moments when he stopped entirely and read the same paragraph 3 times. At minute 11, he took off his glasses and set them on the desk and put his palm flat over his eyes for about 4 seconds. That was the moment she decided he wasn't part of it. Not because of the gesture, because of the timing of the gesture. He'd done it right after reading Noah's denied follow-up report from 3 months before the operation, and a man who already knew about that report wouldn't have needed a moment to absorb it. At minute 19, Hayes closed the folder. Say it out loud, he said. All of it. I want to hear you say the accusation directly, because if I'm going to do what you're about to ask me to do, I need to know that you 3 know exactly what you're saying. Ethan started to speak. Lena raised one hand slightly, and he stopped. Major Daniel Forsyth used his logistics authority to move precision ammunition and specialized weapons through military supply chains to private buyers, she said. He used my armory to do it logged against my unit designation over a period of at least 22 months. Commander Javad Malik was the intermediary who connected those transfers to end users. When Sergeant Walker's team began generating contact reports that threatened to expose the corridor, Forsyth denied their follow-up investigation. When the reports kept coming, he escalated. He used your mission, the Malik elimination, which you initiated in good faith as the cover for an operation designed to eliminate both Malik and Walker's team in a single morning. The secondary element in the valley was positioned in advance because Forsyth gave them the patrol route. The office was completely silent. And me, Hayes said quietly. You were the instrument, Lena said. Your mission request was legitimate. Your intelligence assessment was legitimate. Your insistence that Malik needed to be eliminated was exactly right, and that's precisely why it was useful. Forsyth didn't have to fabricate a mission. He just had to wait for you to build one, then attach his objective to yours. Hayes stared at the folder. I picked the shooter, he said. Yes. I spent 2 years looking for you. I went to the range records. I pulled your competition history. I built the case in my own head that you were the only person who could make that shot, and I walked into your armory and asked you. He looked up at her. His voice had something raw underneath the control. And every single one of those decisions was mine. Nobody made me do that. That's correct, Lena said. So the shot that Forsyth needed as a distraction happened, because I found the one person on this base capable of making it. Colonel, don't. He held up a hand. Don't manage me. I don't need managing. I need 30 seconds. He took the 30 seconds, then he put his glasses back on. Sergeant Walker, he said. What's at that compound? Noah stepped forward. Financial documentation. 6 weeks of movement, in and out, all of it paper and drives, no weapons. They're consolidating before they sanitize. 6 to 8 defenders, 2 exterior positions, 1 elevated at the northeast corner. The documentation is in a secondary structure on the same side. Timeline. 72 hours from yesterday, call it 50. How do you know the timeline? Because 2 days ago, a vehicle came in empty and left full, and it was the first time in 6 weeks that the direction reversed, Noah said. They've stopped consolidating. They've started moving it out. Hayes absorbed that. So you don't have 50 hours, he said. No, sir. We probably have 12. Hayes stood up. He walked to the window and stood there for maybe 8 seconds with his back to them. Then he turned around. Here's my problem, he said. I can authorize a forward reconnaissance movement without generating a flag. I can put a small element on a vehicle and move it out of this base tonight, and nobody above me sees a thing until the after-action report. What I cannot do is authorize an assault on a fixed structure with an unknown defensive posture, using personnel, who include 1 officially deceased ranger, 1 ranger on medical restriction, and 1 weapons technician, because the moment that request touches a network, Forsyth sees it. Then don't request it, Lena said. Hayes looked at her. Say more. Authorize the reconnaissance. That's all. A forward reconnaissance movement to assess a suspected weapons cache site, which is legitimate, documented, and exactly the kind of thing your command handles at your level without escalation. Put the element on a vehicle. She held his gaze. What that element does when it gets there is a decision made in the field by the ranking officer present based on conditions observed on site. That's not a request, that's judgment. Hayes didn't blink. You're asking me to give you legal cover for an unauthorized assault by writing a paperwork trail that permits it retroactively. I'm asking you to authorize a reconnaissance, Lena said. Everything after that is on us. That's not how the responsibility works, and you know it. No, she agreed. It's not. But it's how it's going to work tonight, or it's not going to work at all. Hayes looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. Once. Short and entirely without humor. 7 years, he said. 7 years you've been on this base filing maintenance logs and correcting my NCO's paperwork, and I had you filed as the most rule-bound soldier in this command. I am, Lena said. The rules I follow are the ones that keep people alive. I've never followed the other kind. Hayes sat back down. He pulled a form from his drawer. What do you need? He said. The list took 4 minutes to build. 2 vehicles. A 4-man security element that Hayes would select personally from people he'd known for over a decade. Communications on a frequency Hayes controlled directly. Medical support staged 12 kilometers back. And the rifle. Hayes stopped at the rifle. The AX-50 development platform was recovered by the program office after the mission, he said. It's not on this base. Lena said nothing. Hayes looked at her. Sergeant Carter, is the AX-50 development platform on this base? Colonel, I run the armory, she said. I'd have to check my records. Check them. I already did. She met his eyes. The program office recovered a case matching the AX-50 development platform's specifications, containing a weapon matching its specifications with matching serial documentation. That case left this base and was signed for at the receiving facility. It's fully documented. Hayes stared at her. What did you send them? He said slowly. A functionally identical training variant I built from a damaged AX-50 chassis and a barrel I refinished myself. It's a good rifle. It'll pass any inspection short of a full ballistics workup. She paused. The program office isn't going to run a full ballistics workup on a rifle that's going into a storage vault pending a decision on the program's future. You substituted a weapon on a classified development program. I preserved a weapon on a classified development program, Lena said. There is exactly one rifle in existence built to make a shot at that distance, and I was not going to let it sit in a vault while the people who tried to use it to kill 12 Americans went unaccounted for. She didn't look away. You can process me for that after. Tonight I need the rifle. Ethan behind her said nothing at all. Noah beside him was looking at Lena with an expression that had gone from evaluation to something closer to recognition. Hayes rubbed his face with both hands. Sergeant Carter, he said, when this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about the difference between initiative and larceny. Yes, sir. Get your rifle. The vehicles moved out at 23:12 hours. Lena rode in the second one with the case across her knees and her hands resting on it, and her eyes closed, doing what she always did in the hours before, which was nothing. Not planning, not rehearsing. The planning was finished. Noah had given her the compound's geometry in enough detail that she'd built the firing solution in her head during the 4 hours in the storage room, and rebuilding a solution that's already correct is how you introduce errors into it. So she sat with her eyes closed and her hands on the case, and let her heart rate do the thing it had done since she was 16. It dropped. Torres was in the front seat. She'd argued her way onto the movement in about 90 seconds by pointing out that if the four-man security element needed a radio operator who wasn't going to ask questions afterward, that person was standing right there. Sergeant Carter, she said somewhere in the second hour. Can I ask you something that's not my business? You can ask. 7 years. You could have been a sniper. You could have been anything. Torres kept her eyes forward. Why the armory? Lena was quiet for a while. Because when I was 23, she said, there were maybe 400 people who wanted something from me, and every single one of them wanted a different thing, and none of them wanted me. They wanted the record, or the story, or the recruiting poster, and I got very tired of being a thing that other people were excited about. She opened her eyes. The armory doesn't want anything from me. The armory just needs the work done right. Torres thought about that. That sounds lonely, she said. It was quiet, Lena said. I told myself those were the same thing. Were they? No, Lena said. The Overwatch position was 1,140 meters from the compound. Nothing. A distance she could have managed with an issue rifle and a cold barrel. Noah had chosen it not for range, but for angle. It covered both exterior positions and the elevated one at the northeast corner simultaneously, which meant one shooter could hold the entire outer ring, if that shooter was good enough. Noah had built the plan around a shooter being that good. He'd built it around her before he'd ever met her. Comms check, Ethan said in her ear. Copy. Noah. Copy. Security element. Copy in position. Ethan was quiet for a second. Carter, you have the outer ring. Anything moves toward that secondary structure while we're inside it, it's yours. Understood. You okay? She almost said something dismissive. Then she didn't. Ethan, she said, your brother's been out here 3 months getting this for you. Go get it. A pause. Copy, he said. They went at 02:06. The first 11 minutes were clean. Lena watched the two walkers move through the outer ring the way brothers move when they've done it 1,000 times without signals, without correction. Each one's position implied by the others. She held the elevated position at the northeast corner in her reticle and did not fire because he hadn't seen anything, because there was nothing to see. At minute 12, the elevated position stood up. Lena's finger did not move. He was stretching. She watched him roll his shoulders, watched him turn his head, watched him look at nothing in particular for 8 seconds, and she held the crosshairs on the center of his mass, and she did not fire because a man stretching is not a threat, and she had never in her life fired at a variable she hadn't confirmed. He sat back down. She exhaled. At minute 19, Noah's voice came through low and completely level. We're in. Secondary structure. Documentation is here. How much? Ethan asked. All of it. At minute 23, everything went wrong. It wasn't dramatic, it never is. A vehicle came up the access road that should not have been there for another 6 hours, and it came fast, and it came with headlights off, and Lena had it in her scope before the first man was out of it. Contact, she said. Vehicle access road 4 dismounts. They're not surprised. They're deploying. Say again. Ethan. They're deploying tactically. Nobody deploys tactically getting out of a car at their own compound at 2 in the morning unless they were told there's a problem here. She was already tracking. Ethan. Someone told them. Silence for 2 seconds. Then Noah. Hayes. No, Lena said immediately. Carter. It's not Hayes. She kept the crosshairs moving. Hayes had 11 hours to make 1 phone call, and instead he gave us 2 vehicles and his own security element. If Hayes wanted this stopped, it would have been stopped in his office. Then who? And Lena Carter, watching 4 men fan out toward a structure that contained her only chance of not spending the next 20 years explaining a ledger with her unit designation on it, ran the variable she hadn't wanted to run. The movement log, she said. What? My cover. The weapons assessment request I filed to get us out here the first time. It's legitimate documentation. It went into the normal chain. Her voice was completely flat. And the normal chain for forward support weapons assessments routes through logistics coordination? Silence. Forsyth, Ethan said. He's known where I was looking for 11 days, Lena said. He didn't move because he was watching to see how much I had. Then he's not coming to sanitize the compound, Noah said. He's coming to close it. He's coming to close us, Lena said. The first man reached the corner. She fired. He went down and the second one was already turning, and she fired again, and he went down and the third one had gotten smart and gone prone behind the vehicle's engine block, which was the correct decision. And also the last one he ever made, because Lena Carter had spent 11 days building the geometry of this compound in her head. And she knew with the certainty of someone who does not guess that the engine block of that vehicle, at that angle from her position, offered exactly 41 centimeters of coverage. She fired through the gap. 3 seconds. 3 men. The fourth ran. Elevated position is up, she said, already tracking. He's on you, Ethan. Move left. Moving. The man at the northeast corner had a weapon shouldered and was 2 seconds from a shot at Ethan's back when Lena took him. Clear, she said. Her voice hadn't changed once. Carter, Noah breathing hard. That's 4 in about 6 seconds. 5, Lena said. Take the documentation and go. There's too much. We need a vehicle to the northeast door. Then get a vehicle to the northeast door. There's a vehicle at the northeast door, Ethan said. It's the one they came in. Then use theirs, Lena said. A beat. Noah dry as sand. She's not wrong. They had the vehicle loaded in 4 minutes. At minute 29, a second vehicle came up the access road. She saw it before either brother did. She had the scope on it at 900 meters, and she watched a man get out of the passenger side and stand there in the open, unarmed, with the specific body language of someone who has never once in his career expected to be shot at. Ethan, she said. Stop. What? There's a man standing in the open at 90 meters from your position, and he's not carrying a weapon, and he's wearing a duty uniform. Silence. Then Noah. Describe him. Mid-40s. Heavy set. He's standing next to the vehicle like he's waiting for someone to come talk to him. Ethan's voice went absolutely flat. That's Forsyth. Lena kept the crosshairs on the center of Daniel Forsyth's chest. 900 meters. 0 wind. Cold barrel that wasn't cold anymore. It was the easiest shot she'd ever had in her life. It was so easy, it was insulting. She could feel the whole thing sitting there in front of her, complete and simple. 12 Americans in a valley. 6 men in a kill zone. 3 months of a ranger alone in the mountains eating whatever he could find. 22 months of her name on a ledger she'd never written. 1 pound of pressure. Her heart rate dropped. Carter, Ethan said. He'd heard her not say anything for 4 seconds, and he knew exactly what it meant. Carter, do not. I have him. I know you have him. Ethan, the moment we leave here, he's ahead of us. He's got 16 hours of logistics authority and a ledger with her name on it. That was Noah, and Lena registered with some distant part of herself that Noah had said her name and not his own opinion, that Noah was arguing her case for her because she wasn't going to. He surrenders or he doesn't, Ethan said. He doesn't get to be shot, not by her, not tonight. Why not? Noah said. Because she's not an assassin, Ethan said. Because that's the whole point. Because the entire thing we've spent 3 months trying to prove is that there's a difference between the people who do this work right and the people who use it. And if she pulls that trigger on an unarmed man standing next to a car, then Forsyth's ledger is the truth, and everything we're carrying is just paperwork. The frequency was silent. Lena watched Daniel Forsyth through a 35-power scope. She watched him take out a phone. He's making a call, she said. Carter. She put a round into the ground 11 inches from his left boot. Forsyth did not fall. He did not run. He did the thing that people who have never been shot at do, which is that he simply stopped existing for about 2 seconds, standing perfectly upright, with his phone still at his ear, and his brain refusing to process the information. Then he dropped the phone and got on the ground. Vehicles disabled, Lena said, and put a second round through the engine block. He's not going anywhere. Ethan, he's yours. He's face down, and he's about to discover he doesn't have a plan. Ethan let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Copy, he said. The security element had Forsyth in restraints 90 seconds later. Lena stayed on the ridge until both vehicles were loaded and moving. She broke down the rifle herself. She didn't rush it. She'd never rushed it in her life. She was the last person off that ridge. She had by then taken 5 human lives in about 6 seconds and preserved a 6th, and she carried both of those facts down the hill in the same set of hands, and she did not pretend to herself that they weighed the same. The investigation ran 11 months. Forsyth talked in the 4th week. Not out of conscience, out of arithmetic. The financial documentation from the compound was so complete that his lawyers ran the numbers and told him the only currency he had left was names, and Forsyth had spent 22 months learning to trade things, so he traded. The names went up. 2 more field-grade officers, a civilian program administrator, and a retired brigadier general sitting on the board of a private security contractor who had over 4 years built a supply pipeline that moved American precision weapons to buyers on 3 continents through the simple mechanism of routing them under legitimate mission paperwork and letting the system's own trust in itself do the rest. They had needed exactly one thing to make it work. They had needed nobody to look at the armory. Lena Carter testified for 6 days. They were the 6 worst days of her life, and she never once let it show. On the 4th day, a colonel on the review board, a man she'd never met, reading from a prepared line of questioning, asked her about the ledger. Staff Sergeant Carter, this document records 14 transactions against your unit designation. Can you explain that? Yes, sir. Whoever built those entries used my unit prefix because it was the least examined designation in the theater. Why would that be? Because I'm a weapons technician, Lena said. Nobody looks at the armory. That's not an accident of the system. That's the design of the system. Everything dangerous in this army passes through people like me, and the entire structure is built on an assumption that we're furniture. She kept her voice level. Sir, the reason Major Forsyth was able to run this operation for 22 months is that he correctly identified the single blind spot in the entire command architecture. It's not classified. It's not technical. It's that nobody in a position of authority has ever once believed that the person who fixes the rifles is a person who is paying attention. The room was quiet for a moment. And were you paying attention? The colonel asked. I flagged the first discrepancy 14 months before this investigation opened, Lena said. It's in my logs. It was reviewed and closed as a data entry error by a logistics authority. Sir, I'd invite the board to check whose signature is on that closure. The colonel looked down at his file. He did not ask another question. On the 6th day, a general who had been silent for most of the proceeding leaned forward and asked her something that wasn't on anyone's list. Sergeant Carter, you held 3 national records in long-range precision shooting before you enlisted. You never disclosed that. In 7 years, you never told a single person on your base. He looked at her over his glasses. Why did you hide what you could do for so long? The room went still. Lena thought about her grandfather at a rock outcropping in West Texas. She thought about a truck at 0500 with a woman sitting in it for 2 hours who couldn't explain why. She thought about 7 years of gun oil and cold metal and the particular silence of a room where nobody expects anything from you. Because I thought being unnoticed meant being safe, she said. The general waited. I was 23 years old and I was very good at one thing, and I couldn't tell the difference anymore between the thing and me, Lena said. So I put the thing away. I told myself I was choosing peace. She paused. But that's not what I was doing. I was choosing to make sure that nobody could ever ask me for anything, because if nobody asks, you can never fail them. And now I know what it costs, she said. 12 men almost died in a valley because a system was built on the assumption that nobody was watching the armory. 6 men almost died because a ranger's report got buried by a man who knew nobody would check. And 22 months of weapons went out the back door of my own building because I was so committed to being invisible that I never once considered that somebody might be using my invisibility as cover. She looked at the general directly. Sir, hiding what you can do doesn't protect anyone. It just means that when the moment comes and somebody needs exactly the thing you were afraid to show them, you have to decide in about 4 seconds whether the last 7 years were worth what they're about to cost. Nobody in the room said anything. I'd like the record to reflect one more thing, she said. Go ahead. Sergeant Noah Walker filed a contact report 3 months before any of this happened. He was right. He was ignored. He then spent 91 days alone behind enemy lines, assembling the evidence that this board has spent 11 months examining because nobody would listen to him the first time. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The record already says I made a long shot. The record should say that the entire case exists because one ranger refused to accept being buried and one captain refused to accept a report that took 18 hours to file. I was a rifle. They were the reason. The general looked at her for a long moment. Sergeant Carter, he said, that's the first time in 11 months anybody said something in this room I'll remember. Noah Walker was reinstated with full back pay and a silver star he accepted by walking to the front of a room, taking it saying, "Thank you, sir," and walking back to his seat. Ethan Walker's medical restriction was lifted in 11 days. Hayes was reprimanded, formally on paper for authorizing a reconnaissance movement that exceeded the parameters of its documentation. He accepted it without appeal. When Lena tried to speak on his behalf, he told her in exactly 9 words that he'd known what he was signing when he signed it. Then he made 1 phone call and got her the assignment she hadn't asked for. They offered her a long-range precision unit, not as an armorer, as lead instructor. She said no twice. She said yes on a Tuesday in the armory, holding a maintenance log she wasn't reading after Torres asked her a question that took about 4 seconds to ask and about 11 months to answer. Sergeant Torres said, "If you don't teach it, who does?" Lena looked at the log. She put it down. "Get me the transfer packet," she said. She was good at it. She hadn't expected that. She was hard on them, and fair, and completely without patience for anyone who wanted to be a sniper because of what a sniper looked like. On the first day of every cycle, she stood in front of them and said the same thing. "There are 2 kinds of people who end up behind a rifle at distance," she'd tell them. "People who want to be seen doing it, and people who want to get it right. I'm going to spend 8 weeks finding out which one you are, and I'm going to find out faster than you will." She taught them ballistics and atmospherics and the mathematics of a bullet moving through air that changes 3 times between the barrel and the target. But that wasn't the class. The class was the 4 seconds. The 4 seconds before the trigger, when every part of your brain is telling you that this is impossible, and your only job is to be quieter than that. You cannot be brave at distance, she told them. Bravery is fast, distance is slow. What you need is the other thing. And when they asked her what the other thing was, she'd say, honesty. The wind doesn't care what you hoped. The bullet doesn't care what you meant. You are either correct or you're not, and the only shooters who get correct are the ones who can look straight at what they don't know and say it out loud. She kept her grandfather's rifle in a case in her quarters and never once brought it to the range. She didn't need to. She'd already learned everything it had to teach her. Sometimes in the last hour of a cycle, one of them would work up the courage to ask about the 3820. She'd tell them the truth, that the shot had been correct because the preparation had been correct, that the record belonged to a rifle and engineering team, 18 months of weather data, and a woman who had spent 48 hours not firing it, that there was nothing miraculous in it at all. And then she'd tell them the part that mattered, that the shot was not the story. The story was that for 7 years, in a building nobody entered without wanting something, a woman had done her work correctly every single day, while an entire command structure walked past her without seeing her. And that the only reason 12 Americans came home from a valley in northern Afghanistan was that she had never once decided that being unseen was a reason to stop paying attention. They saw her as just a weapons tech. They were wrong about the just. They were never wrong about the weapons tech. That was the whole point. And she never let a single class leave without understanding it. Greatness does not arrive in a uniform anyone recognizes. It stands in the quiet room at the back of the base, keeping the record straight, keeping the work honest, keeping itself ready, and when the impossible finally walks through the door and asks for a name, it does not hesitate, it does not apologize, and it does not miss. Lena Carter was that woman, and history did not forget her.